had this one for a couple of months, and when I ordered it, this was all I knew about it. This graphic. It was a mystery box deal from Aragon late last year, and it was one to celebrate Wing's birthday, the founder and lead designer of Aragon. So I knew some specs, but I had no idea what it would look like. I just knew its size and that it was ceramic, and when I say ceramic, I mean ceramic. Not just the bezel insert, but also the case and the bracelet. And all of this for around $170, so it sounded pretty crazy. Ceramic watches are normally a high-end luxury thing. So at this price, I had to check this one out, and this is what showed up. And I gotta say, it's one of the best watches from Aragon I've ever run into. Now, before we get any further, I do need to mention that this watch, depending on when you're watching this, may no longer be available, as it was kind of a special run for a special occasion. Right now, I know there are some leftovers on their site, and prices have increased a little bit, but not too much. It's still a pretty good deal. But after these are gone, I'm not sure if there'll ever be another run of this. From what I know, this is based on their Hercules model, but I don't think they've ever had a ceramic Hercules before. That, and I should mention that $170 or so is for the base version. There were a few different dial options, and I decided to go with this upgraded Damascus style. And that upped it to about $208, which is still pretty crazy. Now, as you've probably noticed, this one is a little larger than I typically like, sitting right at 44 millimeters, with about a 51.5 millimeter lug to lug. But that was what I was expecting. I mean, this is an Aragon, and Aragons are known for that. Aragon and Wing's design language is all about beefy watches with large presence. And in recent years, they have reduced their size, but they've reduced it to 43, 44, maybe the occasional 40. But as a whole, they're still kind of on that larger size, because that's really what their audience, what their customer base wants. Now, on the off chance you've never heard of Aragon, I mean, there are plenty of videos out there on them. I've done a few myself, but I've always referred to them as the granddaddy of microbrands. They're based out of Florida, and they've been around longer than that term microbrand has existed. In fact, their previous name was Android Watches, and that existed before the Android phones did. So Aragon has been around for a while, which is why I always say they're the granddaddy of microbrands. Now, the rest of the specs here are what you'd expect for a good entry-level diver. Sapphire crystal, 22mm lug width, 200 meters of water resistance with a screw-down crown. You got a Seiko NH35A movements and 13mm of total thickness, and that is with a sapphire exhibition case back. So pretty typical for an entry-level dive watch, except that use of ceramic. The ceramic case and bracelet makes this something other than that typical entry-level diver that we all have seen time and time again. Like I mentioned before, watches with ceramic cases and bracelets are sort of a niche thing from some luxury brands. Over the last 7 years, I think I've only looked at 2, and one of which wasn't even a full ceramic. Now, compared to steel, ceramic is harder and more scratch resistant, meaning it should look newer longer. It's kind of the pros of it. It's also a little bit lighter, but not quite titanium light. So for example, here, this is 175 grams, give or take a link or two, which is still fairly solid for a good diver, but it's not that bad when you consider how large this diver is. And I can tell you that wearing ceramic is a little bit of a different experience than wearing a steel watch, because practically everything here is smooth to the touch, giving it a more premium feel. And when you pick it up, it does feel cooler, like temperature cooler, not wearing sunglasses at night cooler. So the thermal conductivity of ceramic is a lot different than what you'd expect from steel, and you feel that when you first pick it up and put it on. And as long as I'm talking about wearing it, it is pretty comfortable for its size. Now, yes, it is a larger watch at 44 millimeters, and larger than I've typically been wearing. And the lug-to-lug is longer than I'd prefer as well. But thanks to the curvature of those lugs and the female end links, it actually fits pretty nicely on my 7¼ inch wrist. And felt pretty comfortable throughout the day. Never had that urge that it was just unwieldy and I just had to take it off. I would occasionally feel the crown, but otherwise I'd say it wears pretty nicely for a 44. Now, of course, compared to steel, there are some downsides to ceramic as well. And the main one is that it's more brittle than steel. So say right here, if I just dropped it and it hit the carpet, I'm not too worried about it. But say if I was on a second story and I just sort of threw it, chucked it down on the concrete floor below me, well, there, I'm guessing it's going to partially shatter and not just dent or get scratched up. Meaning once it's damaged, it's pretty much toast. There's not much coming back from that. It's that whole Humpty Dumpty thing. And the other slightly negative to it is that in my own experiences, it can also be a bit of a fingerprint magnet, or at least here with this type of glossy ceramic finish. And this all black look, which since it's ceramic was kind of what I was expecting, it is a bit stealthy. And even with that, I think you can still make out the occasional smudge. And of course, the last negative to ceramic is that it is typically very expensive. Typically, so I'm not exactly sure how Aragon was able to do this one at this price. So I think you could see that ceramic isn't always the best material for an entry-level tool watch or a work watch. But for us watch collectors, a ceramic diver is an interesting one to have. Now, as I mentioned before, this design here is based on Aragon's Hercules model. And I kind of look at it as a really beefed up sub. It just has that sort of case shape, including, although it is a little bit hard to see here, some chamfers on the lugs. I should also point out here that not everything is ceramic, and that should be expected when you're talking about this type of watch. The case and the bracelet are, but the clasp on the bracelet is steel, as well as the case back and the oversized crown. And that oversized crown is one of the few things I'm not really a fan of. And especially with its crater indentation on its outer edge, just seems really odd and out of place. And lastly, the bezel is also steel. Now it has a black ceramic insert, but the bezel itself and the mechanism is traditional steel. And one that has a pretty good action. It's 120 click, unidirectional, maybe a little subdued in the sound area, but still a bit clicky, so overall good stuff. Originally, I wasn't really sure about the Damascus style dial. I picked it because at the time the regular black dials had sold out. So I figured if I was going to get one, might as well get something a little more odd and unusual, especially at the price. Now, I kind of wish that maybe I was able to get a regular black one just to show you more what a normal version of this would look like. But as a whole, I think the Damascus is a little more subtle than I was expecting. I mean, there are times that it looks a little Damascus-y, but there are others where it's actually a little subdued. Just kind of depends on the light, and overall gives the watch a more unique experience. However, the dial design here I think is really good, where you have this outer ring connecting all the applied indices before the chapter ring, giving it maybe a little bit of a sector style dial feel, but also gives the entire thing a very pleasing symmetrical flow, as well as makes it very intuitive and easy to read. Now, of course, down here at the bottom, I love that the date is at the 6, but I would have liked a color matched date wheel, or something other than white with this Damascus steel. And as always, there is a bit too much text on the dial for me. But, for 200 bucks. The loom here is also a little disappointing. It's not bad, and I really like that they use two different colors of loom here. But it doesn't quite last as long as your typical Seiko diver. But again, for 200 bucks, I can only complain so much. In fact, there's only one thing that I can really complain about with this one, and that's that putting the bracelet back on after taking it off was a true pain in the ass. And I think it's partially due to the curvy case shape with the lugs. Just had a hard time getting it to fit just right where the spring bars would pop in. Took way longer than I would have liked. So if you do take it off, just keep that in mind. But, with a ceramic case, the ceramic bracelet's probably going to be the one you leave on it anyways. So the bottom line here is that not knowing what to expect, I did take a little bit of a risk with this one. But for 200 bucks, it's a really nice watch and a great example of what Aragon is all about. Big, bold designs with a lot of value. And I think they're a brand that just doesn't get mentioned enough in watch circles. Their designs aren't necessarily for everyone, but they do have a huge dedicated fan base for a reason. And if you like this kind of a design, you like the size, you like that big, bold presence, you'll probably wind up being an Aragon fan. And especially if you love value. Now, I will have a link in the description to this one, but again, it may not be there by the time you watch this. and I'm guessing they won't make any more of these, or at least not for a while. So if you like a 44, or I think there's actually a 50mm version of this as well, so bigger, bolder watches, that's what you like, and you've been kind of curious about ceramic, then this is one I'd recommend to check out, especially if you like kind of the black stealthy look. But as usual, let me know your thoughts on this one down below, or if there's any other entry-level watches you'd love for me to take a look at. And as always, you guys know what to do down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.